rumors spreading round United Texas town about to shack outside the games. And you know what I'm talking about. Just let me know if you wanna go to that home out on the range. They got a lot of nice girls.
All right, everybody. This is David Woods from Bruin Report Online and John Gold from CBS Sports Blog coming to you live from the first Bruin Report Online podcast. And
Still coming up with a name?
John, I know you have thoughts on the name.
Sup, bro?
Now,
the Sup Bro podcast. I'm with head nod included. Sup, bro?
The jury is still out, John. But we're looking at it, and the Sup Bro podcast could be, the kind of thing that we do. And then,
my vote.
Maybe after a loss, we do the You Mad Bro.
So only Sup Bro after a win. You Mad Bro after a loss.
And it could have its merits. I think there's a whole beginning part of that we could do.
Yeah.
But long story short, we're still working on a name. And so it's a matter of kind of figuring out exactly what we want to do there.
And guys, real quick, just want to apologize in advance for any audio or technical issues because we're kind of new at this. But we are going to do our best to have this sound clean and sound good and have a pretty good discussion here.
All right, so diving right along, John, you've recently left the full-time UCLA beat, but you've started up a blogging position at CBS Sports.
Correct.
So you've expanded your coverage to the entire Pac-12. But I wanted to start with you talking about a little bit of UCLA sports.
Yeah, let's do this.
You've covered the last two games. I've seen you in the press box. Your beautiful bearded self.
Thank you. You have an equally let me rephrase that. You have a superior beard.
I appreciate that.
I think my hair can rival yours, but your beard is A to A+.
My receding hairline is beginning, and I do not think it will end for several years. But
the good news is you can just trim your beard and tape it up top, and it's equal.
It's true. I could do locks of love out of my beard.
There is a pillow that is going to be made with the hair that I'm looking at right now.
Fair enough. But in respect to UCLA sports, you've obviously covered the last two games, and you've been around the beat for 3-4 years now. What do you think's different? I mean, what do you think's different about this team as compared to the last few years under Neuheisel?
Well, I hate this chorus of people out there who just wants to, throw one guy under a bus because UCLA's problems have literally been top to bottom. And at the top, I'm talking the administration at UCLA hasn't put the money, quite frankly, you start with the money. They haven't put the money, the resources, the time, the effort, and the ingenuity into football. And that. Go ahead.
But here's what I would say. I think you might have an objection to throwing one guy under the bus, but do you have an objection to throwing the entire admin at UCLA under that very bus?
Maybe that's what I'm doing. Maybe I'm just I'm sticking them there, and I'm backing the entire 18-wheeler over them. But ultimately, no. And the reason why is this, is it's not just the administration, though. The Rick Neuheisel regime had some fatal flaws, some extremely fatal flaws, that eventually cost him his job. And the players did not buy in. And the effort of the play, the joke, not the joke, but the thing that I used to say for so long is that you're trying, in college football, it's about 80 guys that are willing to run through a wall for you, and instead at UCLA they jump over it, and that's a trite joke. And everyone's kind of
been working on that one for a while.
That took me about 3 years, but these are the things. Look, when you're off the beat now, you can relax and you can say whatever you want. No, when you really analyze it from top to bottom, like we're talking about, from top to bottom, there was a flaw. The Pac-12 network deal coming in and changing everything, really changing everything. Giving UCLA the money and all that kind of stuff. I think they've done a good job in trying to change it. That the whole idea of trying to change the lackadaisical approach to the football program, and that's that's still the biggest issue that I have, is that a football program is a 365-day thing. UCLA football team for a long time was a 260-day.
If that.
Maybe,
I
right?
mean, I think there was an element there where they would have 30 days in the spring. They would have, the entirety of the fall. Maybe a bowl game, maybe not. But the time in between those practices, I don't know how much commitment there was. And I think it's hard to describe anything with UCLA as a sea change until you see more than 3 games.
Yeah.
But I think you kind of knew after spring, and you were there for spring.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of knew after spring there was a difference.
Well, the difference that I saw in spring itself was the level of commitment from 2 people that really mattered the most. Brett Hundley.
Sure. Yeah, and I think really embracing the role of leader.
Yes.
I mean, there was that day where they were running the gassers.
That's exactly what I'm talking
field.
about.
Exactly, and they were running the gassers across the field. Albert Sid
Yep.
is, he's struggling with the gassers. Obviously, he's a big offensive lineman.
Yeah.
And Brett Hundley is the one guy who runs over,
One guy.
jogs along with him, and keeps his head up while Mora's doing his Mora thing.
Yeah.
And it was really, I mean, I think we all noticed it, but it was really a great moment to kind of show this guy's a leader. This guy can actually buy in and really commit to something good.
When people talk about arm strength and they talk about what a guy's 40 is, and they talk about all that crap that is measurable, you can put that in a bowl on one side.
A bowl.
We're gonna have a lot. We're gonna have a lot of food references today, guys. We all know who we're talking with here. When you can put that into one section, okay, on
plate.
one plate, on one fork,
A shelf.
whatever.
Yeah.
One bite. You can have that on one side. The quarterback position, more than any in football, the other side matters.
Sure.
Okay, and you know that.
Yeah.
And when you look at what Brett Hundley has been able to do, the 300-yard passing and 4 touchdowns against Nebraska, 300 more yards and 2 more touchdowns, all that start, to me, is meaningless if the team doesn't look like, gosh, they want to play for him. And I got to tell you something, and this is, an indictment on the previous staff and all that kind of stuff, but I've had players tell me recently, and I'm not talking about during spring, I'm saying
Right.
within the last 2 weeks, tell me about the biggest difference is that the study level of some of the former quarterbacks or current guys who are still on the team compared to Hundley is night and day.
And that's the biggest thing you hear about
Yeah.
Hundley is that whether he makes a mistake or not, he spends hours and hours studying film, hours and hours preparing.
Yeah.
And, you watch practice, and odds are, if you're watching practice an hour afterwards, he's the last guy on the field.
He is.
And
Him and
he's-
Liberato Briasio.
Him and Librado Brasio coming back from that ACL. He's just trying so hard.
I love that kid.
He's great.
I love that kid, and I love his dad. And I've loved the both of them ever since I've watched them. The last 2 guys, literally the last 2 guys on the field for every practice
Yeah.
that I covered for the last year.
Yeah, and I think it's really indicative of his level of buy-in. But
Yeah.
one of the big things I've noticed through the first few games is just, and this is something that it was so weird because in the pistol it's so much more necessary, but the downfield blocking.
Shooter! Shooter!
Shoot him again!
Hey-o!
The biggest thing I've noticed is downfield blocking by wide receivers has been night and day from where it was last year. You look at a guy like Shaq Evans,
Ugh.
who there's been arguments that he is not bought in, and he had not bought in
Yeah.
spring, and he wasn't, maybe not showing the level of commitment as everyone else. But you look at this fall so far, and he has been, without a doubt, one of the best blockers on the team.
Yeah.
He's single-handedly led to, I think 3 touchdown runs, 2 in that first game,
Oh my
one in
gosh.
Nebraska. And he's, when you watch a long run, he's oftentimes the guy who's blocking out
Yeah.
the final guy to, spring for another 10 or 15 yards. And it's just been very impressive so far. And it's not, I don't think it's a rarity. I think there are a lot of guys doing that. Darius Bell.
Yeah.
You see
A couple
Devin
guys
Lucy.
noticeably not doing it.
Couple guys noticeably not doing it. I think Joe Fourier had a very tough game this past game.
Rough game.
Very, very tough. And I think it would be unfair to Joe to say it was all commitment level. I think
Yeah.
there's an element there where he was having a lot of trouble with their quick kind of defense. He was having a lot of
And
trouble
technique.
Yeah, I mean, he's
6'8".
He's a 6'8" guy with a high center of gravity. Blocking is never going to be his strong suit. It's
Yeah.
never going to be. And playing that Y position, it's not a tight end. He's not expected to block as much as a tight end, but it is. I mean, I talked to Darius Bell today, and he was telling me how important it is to block that edge on the screen pass, on the swing pass.
There's an element of this team, and I'm not in any way comparing this team to the New England Patriots, and that's not what I'm saying.
But you are.
But yes, this is the best offense in college football. No.
And Brett Hundley is clearly Tom Brady.
He's Brady-esque. He's at least Matt Castle.
He's Brady, but more mobile.
There we go. Yeah.
Exactly.
He's a better-looking, better-haired Brady.
Perfect. I like it.
Better wife?
Done with podcast.
You know what? Stamped. Sup, bro, out. The thing about this offense is when you watch the Patriots, the biggest thing that I feel when I watch the Patriots is the level of unselfishness.
Sure.
Okay? I don't care how good Gronkowski is and he's awesome. I don't care how good Hernandez is and he's awesome. It's not about that. When Rob Gronkowski gets a pass and you can watch Brandon Lloyd or Wes Welker or these guys or Danny Woodhead just diving into the fold or wanting to get involved. To me, it's this weird selfishness because of unselfish. It's this weird unselfishness because of selfishness. It's like, look, if I make this block for him, he's going to be there to make this block for me. Okay, and you watch the offense right now, and you got Manfro with Manfro. We got pound capital letters Manfro.
Can we just call him Machine Fro? I mean, do you have an objection?
Can we not
to
call him White Mamba? Ever on this? Can we make
Can we just not allow Rick Neuheisel to seriously
Oh my
call
God.
him the White Mamba?
Was that the worst? Was that the worst?
I don't know if it was
Rick
the
Neuheisel
worst,
has
but it
gotten a
wasn't the
10
best.
out of 10 from me for
And
his
he's been great.
coverage.
He's been great.
That one line knocks him down to an 8.
A lot of good preparation.
Proof is in the pudding.
The proof is in the pudding.
No, but what I'm saying is you got the Manfros, you got the Jordan James, you got the Damian Thigpen, Franklin. All these guys are going to get the ball. You almost can't be selfish in this offense. And the only way that you're going to move up in it is if you show that level of unselfishness back.
Well, and I think this is actually a really good point you made, and I think it goes a little bit beyond that, but the unselfishness, or this selfishness through unselfishness,
Yeah.
I think is what you were saying. It's Joe Fourier, a guy like that, or, anybody who struggles with blocking or struggles with the little things in this game, you got to understand that NFL, it's not ESPN highlights that are going to get you on the radar of an NFL team. What gets you on the radar of an NFL team is you're good in all facets of the game. It's not just the spectacular catch you made, it's also the downfield blocking. It's the consistency from play
It's
to
the
play.
look on your face.
There's a reason why Nelson Rosario wasn't drafted.
Thank you.
He had tremendous physical skills, and he was, able to make these spectacular catches downfield, but he didn't do the little things, and he wasn't consistent from play to play. And you would hate for a guy like Joe Fourier, who's these tremendous physical gifts, to actually not achieve what he should achieve because he isn't completing the little things.
It's not only the field of play, though. Okay, I remember so many times, and gosh, this is not an indictment on a kid. This is not just saying, why isn't this kid trying hard enough? Because it's not about trying hard enough. But when you're on a football field, there's 60 minutes of play. Those 60 minutes, you better be wanting to be on that field. Okay, it was a fat piece of crap. Some would argue still am.
I would have said was.
Still argue. Some might argue still am. But
I wouldn't call you a piece of crap, Joe.
Thank you. That's sweet.
Not
to my face.
Not to your face.
Okay.
To several others.
But
today.
But when I played football, did you play football?
I did not.
Okay. When I played football,
my mother wouldn't let me. I played a lot of soccer.
Okay, that's also cool. Not really. When I played football, I ran everywhere on the field. I was the loudest guy on the sidelines because to me I knew I was not a star player. I eventually started a few games my senior year, but I was nothing at all. And I understood that my role had to be as like a de facto cheerleader, and
playing as a defensive back like you were.
Yes, I was. I was at the most people don't know this. You've heard of like Gallaudet School for the hearing impaired. I was at the Thousand Oaks School for the fat, right. And so they needed me at cornerback. You should have seen the safety. He was 6'2", 340. No, but Nelson Rosario would not get the ball thrown to him, or it'd be another running play in the pistol, shoota, and you would just watch him walk back to the huddle. Like someone had just shot his uncle. Like he literally just, his shoulders could not, he's 6'5" and his shoulders were 2 inches from the freaking ground. Right. And, you watch these guys now, and that's why, a guy like Devin Lucien is a guy who I've really trumpeted. Brandon Huffman, who we're talking to later, he turned him on to me when I was, I don't know, or when Lucien was in, I think either a sophomore or a junior, as just watch him play, man. He wants it. He cares.
Yeah, and it was clear last year. I mean, I came onto the beat after my 4-year layoff after the Daily Bruin. I came onto the beat last year working for Tracy, and it was clear just from watching. I mean, I started watching practice in early October, and it was clear that Lucien. I mean, it's tough to say that a true freshman was the best receiver on the team, but it was apparent that he was among the top 3. Like
Absolutely.
him, Shaq Evans, and him and Shaq Evans.
Jerry Rice Jr.?
Yeah, maybe
At times. I mean, gosh.
yeah. I mean, he runs good routes, but Lucien. I mean, he has physical gifts, sure, but just his concentration, his level of route running, his catching ability, like it's night and day with the difference, and his commitment to playing football is the biggest difference. He Coach Yarber was talking about this in the offseason, but Lucien was the guy who, during the offseason, he would come into Yarber's office and say, hey, Coach, I want to go break down NFL film with you. I want to look at guys and figure out what I can do better.
Yeah.
And there have been concentration issues with Lucien because he gets a little hyped up, he gets a little amped up, but those are the kind of concentration issues that you can tend to deal with. You can tend to live with that because it shows a guy who's committed to playing football.
Yeah, and you look at this team, and especially this freshman class, and some of the guys that seem to just kind of pop up out of nowhere. Randall Goforth, as a defensive back, is a good example. Simon Goins as the right tackle. We've made this point, I don't know how many times, the idea of a guy who plays football and a football player, and that difference. Like, a perfect example to me is like Andrew Abbott. This undersized kid.
Right.
He knows the game. He's in the right spot so often. Is he going to make the perfect tackle every time? No.
No, and he looks like a soccer player.
Yes.
But he plays football.
But he plays
it hard.
Yes, and he knows it. And that's something that UCLA has lacked so much. And, does the chicken come before the egg? Do these guys know football? Are these all of a sudden football players because this great new coaching staff is here? Or, are these players who've had all this talent all of a sudden making the staff look genius? Who knows? But you asked me the difference, and there's a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think, you look at it, and Coach Mora and this entire staff, I think, you look at Neuheisel's staff, and they just didn't bring out talent. They recruited a lot of talent, they got talent on the team, but they didn't bring out the level of talent that they had. There might be a better way of putting that, but they didn't maximize. They didn't maximize, exactly. And
who got better?
Exactly. And a lot of guys got worse.
No, I'm asking you, who was, name one guy over the last 3 years where and not that he got better as in he was a freshman and then a sophomore, then a junior, but what guy
who got better from first game to the last game of the season?
Who surprised you over the last 3 years?
No one. And if there were any surprises, they were bad surprises.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at a guy like, I would hate to call somebody out, but Kai Maeva. From his first year at UCLA to his last year, he regressed, I think, periodically every year. And I don't think that's a full attribution to just Kai's dedication to football. I think so much of that is coaching. And I can't imagine there's going to be that lowering of commitment among players from season to season.
And you look at this staff, and, Jeff Ulbrich is a guy who you just look at him, and you're like, wow, that guy
has a great goatee.
He does have it.
He's grown a little bit of the gray beard now, but he's got a good goatee.
It's a solid goatee.
Yeah.
It's among the best facial hair on the staff.
But continue with your point.
But, the big point to me is that you look at these guys and the intensity. None of us have really seen the shadowy figure that is Sal Alosi. But we've all heard Sal Alosi essentially is deep throat now.
We've heard whispers. He's like Kaiser Sose.
He's Kaiser. Oh, I like that. He's the greatest thing that Sal Alosi ever did was convince the world that he didn't exist. No, but you look at the intensity of these guys, and that's not to say Mike Lynn wasn't an intense guy, but you compare Yarber to Moore, you compare Broussard to Moses, the one guy, the one guy that, you can really say I think had that star potential as a coach last year to me has been Clark Lee, but then he was starting Sean Westgate 14 games, or whatever, and it's just what's the word? It's more professional. It's more of a program, and ultimately that's what they need.
I'm gonna steal this from a couple of bro posters, but it's
sup, bro.
Sup, bro. it feels like the grown-ups are in charge.
That's a good way to put it.
And I think that is honestly the best summation.
When
and I
did
think
Mora-
that's a great way of putting it because it doesn't set an expectation. It just sets the tone. It sets this is what the UCLA program
That's a
is
good
now.
point.
There may be wins, there may be losses, but regardless of what happens, you're going to have a football program that feels like a football program.
Feels differently.
Feels differently. It touches people in a different way.
You know, the funny thing is that sentiment of it feeling different, does that come from it looking different? No, it doesn't. It comes from an actual feeling that you have that, like exactly the way you just put it, and that bro poster, that sup bro poster put it, it feels like the big boys are in charge. It just feels like these guys know what they're doing. You know, the best thing that was told to me from top to bottom, from anyone in the staff, my new man crush, Noel Mazzoni.
Who doesn't have a man crush on Noel
He's
Mazzoni
Jake the
right
Snake
now?
Roberts. I hope everyone understands. He's Jake the Snake Roberts from I'm Typhoon or Tugboat. I'm Tugboat. I may be Tugboat or Earthquake or Kamala. This is going to eventually devolve into WWF chat, but
And it's just going to be a recitation of names.
yes. Listen, I may be Tatanka, okay?
I may be Hulk Hogan.
But when you watch, excuse me, this is what I'm getting back to. Noel Mazzoni related a parable or whatever, a tale about how one day when I think he was at maybe North Carolina State, or he was at somewhere in his 98 stops that he's been at.
Right.
And he walks in, and a guy is one of the athletic trainers, assistants, was folding socks. Okay, and he was taking very delicate care to fold socks. And Noel Mazzoni said, "Why are you doing that? Why are you folding socks that way?" And the kid said, and this is just a kid in the program, like not a coach, you know, a GA maybe. And the kid said, if me folding socks the right way is the difference between us winning a national championship or not, I'm going to fold them the right way. Okay? I've never been like, wow, I think I get it a little more now. And I think UCLA gets it a little more too.
I think that's a good point, John. So coming up in the next segment, we actually go live with the Huff Stuff.
H. Diddy?
Brandon Huffman.
Huff Daddy?
Who
Is he just Diddy now? What is he? Huffy? Hiffy?
I like Huff Daddy.
Huff Daddy?
I like that a lot. I mean, considering who's...
Considering the famous protege that might be on this team next year.
Exactly.
Gray shirting, right? Or red shirting or gray shirting?
He's red shirting this year, but
Okay.
as Moore says, next man up.
Next
And
man
next
up.
man up. Maybe...
You know what? I should know. Listen, that's stupid of me. I know he's red shirting and not gray shirting because I saw the Puff Daddy video. The proudest dad in the world. I'd want to get... My goal is somehow to get a world's greatest dad mug into the hands of Diddy.
As you should.
And I think it'll work because I was in the movie Get Him to the Greek with him.
As Jonah Hill.
As my secret identity, Jonah Hill.
I have an interesting story to tell you about Jonah Hill later.
Okay, I can't wait to hear this.
All right. Well, coming up, we've got Brandon Huffman, national recruiting analyst for Scout.com and a longtime Bruin watcher, who's going to give us some good scoop on Bruin recruits.
Great stuff.
All right. See you soon.
About to check outside the games. And you know what I'm talking about. Just let me know if you wanna go to that home out on the range. They got a lot of nice girls.
All right. We are going to be online with Brandon Huffman, national recruiting analyst and
Huff Daddy.
Recruiting expert for the West. for
Huff Daddy, where
Scout.com.
you at?
Brandon Huffman, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, guys. How you doing?
Doing well.
Doing
well.
wonderful. It's great to hear your beautiful voice.
How's Seattle
It's
treating
good
you,
to
big
hear
guy?
my voice, too. Oh, it's a beautiful day today in Seattle. It's like last week, we're going to have decent weather up here. Sitting right outside CenturyLink Field. In fact, where the Seahawks play and the Huskies are playing this year, and just soaking all the sun in because it'll be going away here very soon and won't come back until spring.
Well, you're a SoCal bro. How quickly did you get accustomed to the weather up in Seattle?
I've been here 8 years and I still haven't gotten accustomed to it.
That explains it. It's literally like 95 and sunny, and the pool is right outside. And I hope you know it's going to be this way in about 2 months, too. So
I was going to say that, and that's what you guys call January.
exactly.
So did you shave the head to keep from having wet head all the time, or was it more of a baldness issue?
No, it was a little bit of both. I didn't like the wet hair, but I figured a beanie would fit a lot better on my head during those cold months. It was perfectly shaven. So I was just kind of being proactive, going against it. Wouldn't let the weather get me down, so I was prepared for the weather.
No pun intended with the proactive there, right?
Not at all. I see what you did there.
So we obviously we want to talk to you a little bit about UCLA's recruiting this year. So how do you think the new staff has kind of impacted things, not only with the last recruiting class, but this one coming up?
I think that, especially with the way that they started this season, they have really put the energy they put from the day they got there, and really in the time leading up to signing day, and then more importantly, the work they put in after signing day, getting the 2013 class going with over 100 guys coming to junior day, with the elite camp to go along with their skill position and their line camp. I think now they're finally able to have a little bit more tangible proof that this is a staff that knows what it's doing. One of the things you always deal with when you have a new coaching staff come in is they can come in with all their talk and all their hype and all their hoo-ha about how things are going to turn around, but until you actually see it on the field, it really is empty. And there's been plenty of times at UCLA, especially when Carl Durrell came in and brought Eric Bieniemy and John Embry, who, speaking of a coaching staff that you've been putting any tangible proof on, or even Rick Neuheisel came in. There's a lot of times that they come in with building promise and building hope and all of that, and then they go out, the season starts, and there's nothing to see there. I think this is the time where these first 3 games have shown that a lot of the work they put in those previous 8, 9, 10 months is really now coming to the forefront. And I think if you see what these coaches can do on the field, and then you give them a full recruiting class, I think there's a reason that there is a lot of excitement around the program, why elite guys are now talking about taking official visits, where guys who are saying, I might take an unofficial, and now taking unofficials and saying, I'm going to be back for an official. So I think there's just so much more momentum being built because of the way they've started, that the recruiting that they've done early on is really now getting to kind of see more fruits of what they've been doing.
Huff, you mentioned energy, and that's something that Rick Neuheisel seemed to have in spades, and that almost the entire rest of the staff seemed to lack completely. The idea of going out on the recruiting trail and really trying to get the job done and do an excellent job, it just didn't seem to be there the last few years, I don't know, staff-wide. How has the energy trickled down from Jim Mora with this new staff? Because it seems like it really has.
I think that the big thing, like you said, with Rick Neuheisel is that there was the energy, but it can't all be on the head coach. And even when he had Dwayne Walker that first year, Dwayne Walker was basically there to help keep that class that Carl Durrell and him put together during the 2007 spring and summer and into the season. But once Walker left for the Mexico State job, you lost a guy like Eric Scott, who when Neuheisel was hired, Scott was gone. So 2 of your more aggressive recruiters were now gone. And Neuheisel really seems to be the guy doing all the groundwork and doing all the legwork down until signing day. He would get a lot of those guys to flip, based on him sitting in the living room and really putting a lot of emphasis on how those guys can help change the program. But he was having to do so much of it. Since head coaches are limited to how much time they can be on the road, it really hurt what he was able to do. And you had cases where there were elite players in UCLA's backyard that the coach just flat out blew it with. And whether it was Reggie Moore blowing it with receivers locally, especially Shaq Evans, who kind of came full circle getting Shaq Evans, but, just terrible breakdowns from the assistant coaches and a lack of desire to go out and recruit. And especially in the last year when it seemed like the writing was on the wall and the staff was dead man walking, they kind of approached recruiting that way. Well, now you got a guy like Mora, who is a foreigner to the college game, coming into this season, and the first 2 hires he makes are guys that are known for their excellent recruiting skills, and Demetrius Martin and Adrian Clem and Steve Broussard. And then he gets a couple of other guys that might have been in the NFL, but immediately are taken to how much they enjoy recruiting, and Jeff Ulbrich. And so you take some coaches that already know that recruiting is the lifeblood of your football program, and you take a couple of guys that are Southern California natives that were recruiting guys to Dallas or to Seattle or to Tempe and even Pullman before that, and now you put them where they're close to home. They're able to be turned loose on places that they're familiar with. They have an easier time spelling Southern California to a lot of these guys. And so those are just 4 or 5 coaches off the top of the head that you can point to and look at and say, hey, those guys are really good recruiters, and they're young, and they're energetic, and they've got a lot of ties in Southern California. And then you take Mora, who can come in and talk about his experience in the NFL, and you talk about even this guy like Adrian Clemens, the 3 Super Bowl ring. I mean, he did a brilliant job of putting together great recruiters on staff who, by the way, are now showing that they're also pretty darn coaches on the field. And I think that made a huge difference compared to Neuheisel, who did all the recruiting himself and then didn't even have that great of positional coaches on the staff.
One thing that stood out to me talking to, just reading a lot of reports about the recruits from last signing day is how many of them mentioned Mora. And this is a guy who obviously had no recruiting experience coming into this. Are you surprised with how easily he's kind of adapted to the recruiting game?
No, I'm not that surprised, just in the sense that, here's a guy who's got teenage kids. So he kind of knows what you need to say and do with teenagers. And I think that's one of the advantages that he had by having those teen sons, is that he kind of knows what high school guys like, and what to sell. Now, obviously, it's magnified because now not only is he trying to adapt to their personality, but it's also to what their expectations are in a football program, to a school that he really didn't know a whole lot about, to a region that he may not be as familiar with to say if he had stayed in Seattle and taken the head coaching job at the University of Washington, where he played and went to school and where he had spent some time. But I think you just talk about his ability to be a head coach. And the reality is one of the most polarizing figures yet most talked about players in the NFL the last 5 to 10 years is Michael Vick. And that was one selling point that he could have with recruits, is to say, hey, I coached Michael Vick. It's not like, Carl Durrell saying, well, I was the position coach with the Denver Broncos for Mike Shanahan after John Elway retired, or Rick Neuheisel, the offensive coordinator for the Ravens before Joe Flacco got there. I mean, you're the guy that coach was the head coach for a player that was probably one of the first 5 names out of most football players' mouth, most high school football players' mouth, is the player that you ask to name me a player in the NFL. And I think that helps kind of relate, in terms of him knowing that that's a guy that people know, and he could say, hey, I played with that, or I coached with that guy, and then just being around the game in general. I think one of the other advantages, too, was when he was with University of Washington, or when he was with the Seahawks, he was that close to the University of Washington, obviously having played there, but also being close to the UW program, both as a player, as an alum, and then being nearby. I think he understood in those 2 years that he took off from coaching that, there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot that he could bring to the table as a head coach, but as a recruiter as well, especially when he's kind of putting a good group of recruiters on staff that can kind of teach him some of the other X's and O's in terms of recruiting and what he needs to say and what he can't say, when he's recruiting a kid.
Yeah. You mentioned the Michael Vick effect. I think most clearly that had an effect immediately with this last class with Devin Fuller. Jim Mora comes in and all of a sudden they get the number 2 quarterback in the country and a guy that they call a dual threat. Who's the Devin Fuller of this class for UCLA? Who are the Ellis McCarthy, the Devin Fullers, the Brett Hundleys, the guys who are really going to take this class? Ultimately, it's 6 months or 5 months away, but who do you think could end up brewing? Who's going to really, make that national noise?
I think if you look at the guys that aren't committed right now, Priest Willis is one that really could be that elite recruit. I mean, he's not, I wouldn't really call him a national guy in the sense he's from Arizona, but he's a national level recruit, a guy who's got offers from coast to coast. LSU's got him coming for an official visit for the Alabama game. So when you've got a program like LSU recruiting you, and considering the amount of talent they put in the NFL, especially on the defensive side of the ball under Les Miles, that's a national level recruit. He's that kind of guy that can really take this recruiting class up a notch, not just because he's a highly regarded, highly ranked player, but he's a difference maker. He's an impact type of player, and he happens to play in the secondary, which is Jim Mora's specialty. You look at arguably the best recruiter on staff being Demetrius Martin. That's the guy that he's put a lot of time and energy into. He's from Tempe, so Noah Mazzoni is very aware of him. So he's a guy that 3 or 4 different coaches can say that they've got a chance to make an impact and make an impression on him. There's been a lot of talking to Priest this summer. There was a time where Priest and his sister, his younger sister, and his stepfather were taking an unofficial visit to UCLA, and his dad was telling that Priest's younger sister was sitting there just destroying Jim Mora's office and grabbing stuff from all over the place. And instead of getting frustrated and annoyed, like as a father of 4 kids, I can kind of understand, he got down the floor and started playing the toaster and totally took through, because it wasn't like he was trying to put on a show. Here's a guy who's got young kids and he can kind of relate. And I think that made a big impression on Priest, and I think it made an impression on his family. So that's the kind of a guy that could be an impact player, and UCLA is doing everything they can to make an impact on him. And so he's that Ellis McCarthy type in this class. And the guys UCLA hasn't gotten a commitment from, but you can bet that they're doing everything they can from a recruiting standpoint to get that guy and to let him be that next big player.
Yeah.
I did have a question for you. Obviously, this past week there was a lot of hubbub over the Eddie Prince decommitment. What, in your opinion, what went on there? I mean, there was talk of a promise to Prince. There was talk of, a decommitment from UCLA's end. I mean, what do you think actually happened there?
I think what actually happened is that UCLA went and did their due diligence, went and watched a local kid that happens to be a quarterback, that happens to have been a guy that is, in Los Angeles, that happens to be a guy that Noel Mazzoni had offered when he was at Arizona State.
Hayden Reddick.
If you're a quarterback coach, you go, Hayden Reddick, we're talking about. You're a quarterback coach and you're an offensive coordinator, and you really are in charge of recruiting the quarterback. You got a local kid that you can go see the night before a home game in the Southland that's not too far from where you're at. You take that opportunity, and it wasn't just like Hayden Reddick was the only player that was on the field. Brandon Cox from Pasadena was there, although he was hurt. Another quarterback, Damari Scott, a receiver from Cathedral. Cathedral's always got talent. They've gotten some players from there before. So he just did what most college coaches do on a night that they're out. He went and saw a local product. Well, of course, that took, I think, some family by surprise, and they couldn't believe that there was the thought that a coach would go see another quarterback. And so I think that there was probably some panic on that part. But frankly, I think it was a good mutual decision by both parties to go separate ways. I don't necessarily think that Eddie Prince was a good fit for what UCLA wanted to do offensively. I don't know that he was a good fit for what UCLA was trying to do as a program as a whole. And, to me, he's a good high school quarterback. He was probably not a high-level college prospect. And you can find a bunch of those guys in your own backyard. You don't need to go down to Georgia to find a kid like that. You can find a bunch of kids like that in Southern California or Central California, Northern California, but you don't have to use the resources. And why not go to a school that maybe has some players down the line that you have a realistic shot at getting down the road? And so I think, UCLA doing their due diligence, some people being hurt that there was, and the funny thing is that it wasn't like they just offered Hayden Reddick. It wasn't like, Hayden Reddick decommitted from LSU to come to UCLA. They went and watched the guy who they had offered well before Eddie Prince had even made a decision to commit to UCLA, a guy that they had offered, that technically Noel was only offered before he was even at UCLA, and he was recruiting him to Arizona State. So it would be one thing if it was a random quarterback that they hadn't been showing much interest in, but this was one of their three quarterbacks that they had offered early on between Reddick, Eddie Prince, and then Troy Williams. So it would have been no different if they had gone to go see Troy Williams, who remained pretty adamant that he followed to Washington. I think that it was reactionary on one side of the coin, and that's where you're at now, where UCLA and Eddie Prince have parted ways, and I think it's for the best for both sides.
Yeah. One thing I have a question for you specifically about. Hayden Reddick comes along after UCLA is winning noticeably. They beat Nebraska. They're beating Houston by big margins. There seems to be kind of a shift for UCLA, obviously, in terms of the national recognition. Recruits are coming after them. Franklin on the Heisman list. But I keep hearing and reading about this idea of BBS, battered Bruin syndrome. And you're a long time, Bruin follower. You're someone who knows a lot about the program. Can you kind of break this down for me and really just kind of explain to me, I guess, the general mood that you're feeling about the program right now, and also, where it can go from here in terms of the success that they're having?
For myself, obviously, I first got my start covering UCLA recruiting 10, 11 years ago. So, grew up watching games there. Now that I'm a national guy, I tend to be very objective in looking at things, from a West Coast standpoint. What I look at it as, in following UCLA since 1982, you haven't seen this kind of energy in at least 15 years. You got to go back to, or 14 years. You got to go back to the 97-98 season where there was this much buzz about UCLA and real buzz. You have the 2005 season where they went 10-2, but it was very much a fool's gold 10-2. They beat a San Diego State team early on in the season. That wasn't that great. They beat an Oklahoma team that was...
Whoa! I covered that team, and I was at that game.
About San Diego State, but they were bullish.
I was at that game. Oh, God. You were Tom Kraft. You're giving me nightmares.
Don't say the word craft around us, all right?
It was such a significant game that they were still showing the end of a 50-0 or whatever Hawaii USC blowout to miss the first few minutes. So that's what kind of name cachet that game had.
Whatever, bro.
They beat a Rice team by 50 whatever points. They beat an Oklahoma team which lost Jason White. That ended up being pretty much one of the worst Bob Stoops teams that he had in his time at Oklahoma. And then there was all those monumental comebacks over the course of the season against just pedestrian teams. Then, of course, there was the Arizona game and the USC debacle.
Yeah.
And so there really was never this excitement in that 10-2 season that, oh, my gosh, they're turning the corner. Oh, my gosh, it's a team that's worth watching. And then they lose Tom Cable. Then they lose Eric Bieniemy. So even if there was kind of that flash-in-the-pan excitement, it wasn't sustained. You really got to go back to the late 90s, even the early part of 2001, where they had a couple big non-conference wins over Alabama and Michigan, Ohio State in that span. But really, if you go back to the USC game in 2001 where they got shut out, it's been a bad decade for UCLA football. And I think for the first time, really since maybe the earliest part of the 2001 season, but really, overall, realistically, since the late 90s, there just hasn't been enthusiasm. There hasn't been excitement. And, we talk about battered Bruin syndrome, and you just talk about how when you follow UCLA football, you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I remember covering the Notre Dame UCLA game for Bro 6-7 years ago. It was at 2006, and walking, you see that they make a stop with a minute and a half left, and in 3 plays, Notre Dame goes 80 yards. There's Jeff Samardzija just flipping a Christian Taylor tackle. There's a leprechaun running around, and the echoes of Notre Dame being woken up. And I talked to some UCLA fans after the game, and asked if they were surprised. Like, no, when you're a UCLA fan, you expect that to happen. And even the UCLA fans that watched the 13-9 victory in 2006, I would probably say 99.9% of them fully expected John David Booty to complete that Hail Mary at the end of the game and USC to score a touchdown. And that's what it's been like for the last decade. So you look at kind of a 180-degree turn UCLA football's made in only 3 games. You got to temper the enthusiasm because it has only been 3 games. But I think for the first time, you're seeing a real confidence in the coaching staff, which has kind of given everybody reason for excitement that I think is going to, really help their psyche over the course of the years. Now, we'll see if it's the case if they lose their first game. But I think if you look at just the general overall psyche of Bruin fans right now, you haven't seen this since Cade McNown was behind center.
And we'll just wait for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
There's 9 more games for that shoe to drop.
God. Debbie Downer.
All right.
Debbie Downer Huffman. Thanks so much, bud.
You got anybody anytime, folks.
All right, bud. You have a good one.
We'll check in with you in a couple weeks.
All right.
Brandon Huffman from Scout.com.
All right, guys, we're going to jump right back into the conversation. David Woods, John Gold coming right back at you.
Rumors spreading round in that Texas town about the shack outside the games. And you know what I'm talking about. Just let me know if you wanna go to that home out on the range. They got a lot of nice girls.
All right, so that was Brandon Huffman of Scout.com. So, what
National recruiting analyst?
National recruiting analyst. And
Guy knows what he's talking.
He knows exactly what he's doing. And obviously more of an expert on the West Coast, but he's got a good feel for a lot of prospects across the nation.
He had an interesting take on the BBS, the battered Bruin syndrome. That's something that I'm trying to really understand because it's a fascinating idea of a team's fan base being so broken down that ultimately, like, there's a level of show me, not tell me with this team that's surprising because they're 3-0 and they've already beaten Nebraska.
I think I can speak to this fairly well because I come from a family of longtime Bruin fans.
I come from a family of people who've been battered.
I've come from a family of abuse. My dad went to UCLA. My eldest brother went to UCLA. My elder sister went to UCLA.
Oh, wow, okay.
And so it was a generational thing. And
you guys are the Woodens, right? You're not the Woods.
It's a thing.
Okay, it's a thing.
But coming into this school. I came in 2003, which is the beginning of the Durrell era.
Yeah.
And so while I've been seriously following the team, there's been one season where they've won more than 7 games.
Yeah.
And that was 10-2 when legitimately in 2005 they should have won about 6.
Yeah, it was a fluky 10-2.
Yeah, fluky 10-2.
And 68 starting quarterbacks in that time as well.
The craziest thing is every year there's this hope mixed with dread at the beginning of a UCLA season because there's so many arguments for why they could be good and so many reasons why they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And the reasons they shouldn't be usually have something to do with the coaching staff. And the reasons they could be have something to do with this idea of what the talent should take them to.
Yeah.
And you look at the teams the last few years and they just haven't had... Honestly, they haven't had the schemes. They haven't had the offensive schemes. They haven't had the defensive schemes.
What was so bad last year? I've watched the games. I still don't get it.
You had...
I mean, I understand the idea of they had the DBs back like 98 feet, and there was the spacing was atrocious.
Here's I think what ultimately the issue was. You had an offensive system that most of these players weren't recruited for, and that the coaching staff didn't entirely understand.
Oh, gosh.
Jim Mastro was the one guy who was very familiar with the pistol, and he wasn't the offensive coordinator.
And he has one eye that looks like RoboCop.
Well, yeah, and that's a huge issue, because you can't just have
One
eye
eye that looks like
RoboCop. You need to have at least 2. But, I mean, even beyond the RoboCop, the significant RoboCop issues, you've got a coaching staff. I mean, Neuheisel, what did he do? I mean, first of all, let's just have a moratorium on this for a second. Moratorium is not the right word, but we're going to roll with it.
Okay.
Rick Neuheisel and Carl Durrell were on the same staff at Colorado. Can we just think about that for a second and think how that team scored points?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, no, just stare at that for a second.
A lot of guitar playing.
Yeah, and a lot of kumbaya. But you look at Neuheisel's team last year, and Neuheisel's primarily done, West Coast offense, a little bit of...
no clue.
Just a pro-style set, mostly.
Yeah.
And having the decision to go to the pistol was, I think it was made hastily.
The worst decision since?
The
worst decision since, fill in the blank.
The decision since Napoleon decided to invade Russia in 1812.
Good call.
I think that's the only...
What was that called? The something winter?
The Winter War? No. That's definitely something. That's Finnish Russian War.
I have no idea.
I have no idea.
We're getting way. Listen, this
is
veered off course.
This is devolving.
We're talking Crimean War here. No, look, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about how they essentially went completely against everything they knew.
Right. And a fundamental issue on the defensive end is that they went completely to what they've known for the last 10 years, which is bend but don't break, never blitz,
God.
Leave your cornerbacks 10 to 15
Wasn't
yards off
the whole
the
thing
line of
about Joe
scrimmage.
Tracy that he blitzed?
That was the whole thing through camp, at least for as far as I know. The whole thing
I'm
was
baffled.
that he was blitzing all the time, had an aggressive scheme, brought linebackers from various different locations, brought cornerbacks, had safety blitzes, had all kinds of crazy packages. But here's what I got from Joe Tracy last year, which I think was indicative of his thinking. He believed that he could blitz teams that didn't have great quarterbacks. But when he looked at the Pac-12, all he saw were all of these great quarterbacks. You got to remember, he came from the Big East, where a lot of these teams don't have very good quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And he looked at it and he was like, well, I need to put more guys in coverage because these quarterbacks are going to tear me apart. But he was looking at it from a very, textbook manner.
And he was looking at it from a reactionary manner.
Exactly, and that's the one thing you can't do on defensive end because...
On any end.
Well, yeah, I mean, offensively, the one big advantage that an offense has, and this is what any football coach will tell you, is that you have the advantage of surprise. Mm-hmm. The one thing that you need to take as a defensive coach is the advantage of surprise.
Yes!
You need to surprise the offense with what you're doing.
What was the best package that we saw last year? Arami Deolanian off the edge. Why?
Exactly.
No one knew. No one knew.
You had a 215-pound defensive end who could outquick any offensive tackle. And sure, a team could game plan against it, but that's why it's a package. It's not a full-time thing. And that's, I think, and to bring it back to this year, because I don't want to get into a whole thing about why Neuheisel was horrible, but to bring it back to this year, that's why this coaching staff, I believe everyone feels is different. because you don't have this sense that they're first operating out of their wheelhouse, and second that they don't understand the fundamentals of what makes good football.
Yeah.
You have a offensive coaching staff that understands the element of surprise, that understands how to move guys in space so that they're in advantages. They're matched up one-on-one in situations where they're, a swing pass to the outside that actually has blockers. And you have a defense that, don't you just love that when they come out in a game, it's not starting passive and then working up the aggression, but instead they come out as aggressive as they're going to come out the entire game. And if they need to work back into passivity throughout the game because, a four-man rush is working, they do so. Isn't that...
What's a halftime adjustment? Because I didn't see him for 3 years. Like, what is that? Because that, to me, has been... We can talk about everything. We can talk about what the coaches have done to instill this confidence in these kids. We can talk till we're blue in the face about, the schemes and all that kind of stuff. But all I know is that the team that starts the first half and the team that starts the second half looks different.
Right.
And that's...
It's a fundamental change. Like, it's
shocking.
It's something that didn't happen.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened for... There's a reason why we were all so shocked in the Rice game that Rice scored 24 points in the first half. So what were we expecting? 48 points in 48 points in the game.
Do you know Taylor Martinez's stats in the second half against UCLA for the Nebraska quarterback?
No, do you have them?
Off the top of my head, and these are a little bit off, but they're generally correct. I want to say in the first half he was 13 of 17 for like 169 yards passing, and he had I want to say it was either 4 or 6 carries or whatever for 80-something yards. I forget the exact numbers. Okay,
probably about that.
All I know is in the second, he finished the game at 17 of 31 passing. Right. So we went, I think that's 4 of 14 in the second half. Okay, and you watch that game. He never looked comfortable. He was looking. They were
by the end of that game, he looked like
Taylor Martinez.
Yeah, he looked like the practitioner of the arm punt.
Yeah, the arm punt. You mentioned a difference of this team and the coaching staff now, a real coaching staff. You look around the rest of the conference. Okay, what's going on with this conference? I mean, obviously, we'll get into USC Stanford a little bit later, but let's shift into a little more conference-wide discussion. I mean, Todd Graham at Arizona State clearly
has done amazing things. I mean,
Arizona, my gosh, Rich Rodriguez,
and it's crazy the amount of change there's been in the conference in terms of the spread systems in place, in terms of what they're doing offensively. I mean, it's like everyone decided, hey, let's just run Mike Leach's offense.
Yeah,
let's just get everyone on board with this and let's do it.
Well, what's so interesting is how many of these teams, like Oregon a few years back, going from Bellotti to Chip Kelly, that was like a seamless transition and went former head coach to offensive coordinator.
Right.
Arizona goes from freaking Mike Stoops to Rich Rodriguez. They literally, as people, as men, as coaches, they could not be.
They could not be at further ends of the spectrum.
Washington State going from Paul Wolf to freaking Leach. Arizona State going from Dennis Erickson to Todd Graham. And Rick Neuheisel to Jim Mora.
Right.
I mean, all 4 of these were drastic departures. And that, to me, is the most fascinating thing, especially the early results.
Yeah, I mean, it's been tremendous. I mean, you look at even a team like Oregon State, what they were able to do against Wisconsin. And look, I don't think Wisconsin's very good. I mean, they barely were able to run up. I think they got like 260 yards against Utah State.
Yeah, I'm going to pause you real quick because I'm interested in this. Should there be rankings before the season?
No, of course
not.
Thank you. I mean, you look at it like
God!
This. You look at it like
it drives me nuts.
Everyone, and it's not even as true with the AP poll because the AP is slightly better about actually...
It's like rating the girls in high school and not knowing if they put out. It's like rating them just based on their looks and having no idea if they put out.
You don't know which ones are super Christian, which ones are waiting till marriage. You don't know any of these things. And
if you don't know that, this is exactly how we end up with Alabama and LSU every year. Is because they're the 2 hottest cheerleaders and neither of them put out, and you get 13-9.
Exactly. That's how you end up.
That's it.
But you look at it
I think we just solved college football with that one analogy.
I think it's perfect.
Done.
I don't even know why we talk anymore. But
no, go on.
I look at it this way. The AP actually watches games. Yeah. The Associated Press, the writers, generally are watching games. I know I watch a lot of games. I know you watch a lot of games. I know most writers who are doing their due diligence at least watch the teams that the team they're covering are going to play.
Yeah.
Right? So there's an educated sense there, and you'll see more movement from the opening poll in that poll than you will in the coaches poll.
Yeah.
Which is the most useless endeavor I think I've ever seen because coaches, by definition, cannot watch that many games. They have to do the homework on the games for the teams that they're going to play. They have to watch their games and scout themselves. They can't be watching a UCLA coach. I mean, I don't think Moore is a part of the coaches poll, but if he is, a UCLA coach isn't going to be watching an Alabama game. He's not going to be watching an LSU game. He's probably not even watching an Oregon game at this point because he's not playing Oregon this year.
And even worse than this, it's fine if, okay, it's one thing to not be watching Alabama. Alabama is at least on the TV for an option. Now you're talking 3 weeks into the year. We have no idea how good, I don't know, Oregon State, okay, right. For example. Oregon State is not going to be on TV. No one's going to care about Oregon State. Wait a second, they're good? Now they're good? It's this whole idea of having no clue about what a team's makeup and chemistry can be.
Sure.
It infuriates me.
No, and I totally agree with that. And I don't know if there is a movement towards it because I think people love the idea of in mid-August or late August or whenever it comes out, having the idea of a poll. And it's a big thing for fans to look at a poll and say, okay,
listen,
my team is preseason number one.
I know you're a fan of polls at any point.
I love polls. I'm a big pollster, you know?
You're a big poll guy. You've always been a big poll guy. You're a big Pollock is what I'm saying.
You're calling me a big poll.
Pretty much is what I'm saying.
Fair enough.
No, going around the rest of the conference, kind of reining it back in a little bit. We both agree, and I think everyone agrees. And this hypocrisy, the BS behind it is so stupid. It's just nuts. But bring it back to the conference a little bit. What team has been... It's a little hard to judge because now UCLA's playing Oregon State, and we're also going to have a quick little snippet of the Pac-12 conference call where I asked Mike Riley a couple questions, and we have that a little later, the Oregon State head coach and hopefully the future host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
God, he'd be so great.
He's the sweetest guy.
You know he wears sweaters. You know he comes in the door after a game and he takes off the jacket, the Oregon State jacket, takes off the headphones because he still wears them home, and he walks to the closet and he puts on a sweater and then he sings to the camera. And you know he does that.
He lights up a corncob pipe and his wife comes up to him in an apron, sometimes only an apron.
Because sometimes it's Saturday night and he just wants some love.
And cannot begrudge Mike Riley some love. Mm-mm. But we both agree he's a prince of a guy.
No, and to be honest, and I don't mean to have another digression, but I like to live in an opposite world where Mike Riley actually is the UCLA coach, and he has been for the last 10 years.
Because you mean could happen?
It absolutely should have happened.
When you say the alternate world, I definitely thought you meant I like to live in an alternate world where Mike Riley's the biggest dick ever. And I definitely thought...
I couldn't even imagine a world
I thought that's what threw me off. And if you saw me right here, my mouth was like waiting. My mouth was agape waiting for you to say what was coming next.
No, and I think that's fair. I think that could have been something that came out of my mouth, but it wouldn't be possible.
Mike Riley... Never mind. So... We were talking about the conference. What's been the biggest surprise to you? I think, to me, the biggest surprise is how bad USC's offensive line is. I know that's a big stretch, and I know everyone's talking about one guy doesn't mean the world, and Holmes and all that kind of stuff.
I think
they have talent. I mean, they got a ton of talent. How is this possible?
I think there's a severe lack of depth, and I think something that's set USC apart over the last 10 years of the Carroll era and the beginning of this Kiffin time is that they've had this level of competition. They've had guys at every spot who could compete and push the starters to...
Future pros.
Yeah, and push these future pros to even greater heights.
Yeah.
You had, tremendous talent at the running back position. You had tremendous talent at the quarterback position. You had tremendous talent everywhere. And with the sanctions, with everything that's going on in terms of the scholarship limitation, a few key injuries, they're left with the situation where much of their team hasn't had that level of competition this year. And so I think watching that game against Stanford, I was left with the impression that USC was, I hate to use the word soft, but I think a little bit, they weren't prepared for that level of intensity from Stanford.
I'm not just trying to totally bash what you said here. I don't think soft is the word. Mm-mm. The word that I think of is Hollywood. Okay? It's the idea of this beautiful exterior, this beautiful, beautiful set that looks like it's, in itself is a gorgeous mansion. Mm-hmm. And then you open one of the doors and it's this hollow lot, okay? And you can have a great passing, you can have a great Okay, here's something. You can have a great throwing game, and that doesn't equal a great passing game. Okay? Passing game includes the blocking.
Right.
And it includes how the running game sets it up. And it includes the plays that the coaches are going to call and all that kind of stuff. And right now, through sheer force of will, obviously USC's throwing game excelled against, who was it, Syracuse and Hawaii? Just 10 touchdowns for Barkley, etc.
Sure, yeah.
But when they needed to find the pass, okay, when they needed that rollout pass for first down that you need, they couldn't get it. And that's a product of 26 rushing yards. It's a product of struggles in the offensive line. Or maybe I'll be the first person to do this, giving credit to Stanford's defense.
And it's a true thing that Stanford probably has one of the best front sevens in the Pac-12. And
they play disciplined. And
they play disciplined. They're Stanford. It's a smart team.
Yeah.
And I don't think that can be overstated. I think it's a team that, generally speaking, is going to know its assignments. And with the Harbaugh years generating a little bit of recruiting buzz, and just generally Stanford recruits pretty well among the smarter students.
Yeah.
Because when you get a Stanford offer, you take it.
Yeah.
I think there is an element there where they have better talent than they've had in several years. Sure. And so it is a team that I think can make some noise, especially on defense.
What's scary is where they're going to be in a few years once it becomes what USC had, where like everyone around like 03 for USC, 03, 04, it just became year after year they were going to get everyone, year after year. And it's like talent replicated talent.
What I would say about Stanford is I think...
Are the grades too high? Is that...
Well, they go as far as David Shaw takes them. And I don't know how great of a coach David Shaw is.
He's up there for me. I really like the guy.
I watched that San Jose State game, and he did one of those new Heiselian things where he...
real quick, I love that there are terms in the UCLA vernacular like Dorellian and New Heiselian.
I don't even know if that's the proper one for New Heisel. Is it New Heiselen?
Oh, the New
New Heiselander?
It's the New Heisel era, so it would be New Heiselistic? No.
New Heiselistic, I like that.
New Heiselistic?
I'm a New Heiselist.
Yeah, there you go. It's like a nihilist.
It's
like a nihilist, someone who just expects the world to end.
He calls a lot of weird timeouts like New Heisel. I don't know that his game management skills are amazing.
Does he punt on 4th and 1 from the 37?
I haven't watched enough Stanford to know, but I know that he called the timeout after a TV timeout once.
Oh, that...
And, and those are small indications.
All right, you got me.
Those are small indications. I don't think he's a Harbaugh, and I'm not sure he'll sustain the success there, but I don't think it'll be a quick drop-off. I think Stanford's going to be good for a while, and I think it's a tough team to play. They're a tough team. They run a lot of power on offense, and they've got a very stout front seven on defense. So it's a tough one for a team like USC, again, that didn't have that level of competition in practice. They didn't deal with that. They haven't dealt with that in a long time.
One thing that's really interesting to me is you mentioned their power running game and how they play football. Given what's gone on in the college game, and especially in the Pac-12 over recent years, it's surprising, and it's relieving is not the right word, but I appreciate the fact that they've stuck with that scheme, and that it's the idea. The idea is that's not old school football. It's not old school to run an excellent play action game.
No.
That doesn't make you old to run a good power game with a great play action. It's you have to be disciplined, and you have to be smart, and you have to be willing to set things up like a boxer and rope-a-dope a guy a little bit and then wait for that kill shot.
Well, and there is something there where Stanford can run kind of that more of a, I don't know if it's a pro style, but more of a power set, because their guys they're smart guys.
They're smarter.
They can execute plays that, and more consistently than some guys who aren't going to master the playbook as quickly, aren't going to do that stuff, and it's just a fact of life.
Yeah.
And so they can run an offense that maybe is a little bit more conservative, but they can run it well because they're going to execute it better. They're going to do everything they need to do because they know their assignments better.
Yeah.
For me, the biggest surprise so far, it's hard to say it's not UCLA.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's hard to say it's not the fact that a team that went 6-8 last year is now 3-0 and looks like an entirely different thing than the previous year. But, we've already gone into it a fair amount. I think it's just to touch on it more, I think it's just this general sense that it's an entirely different team with much the same talent.
Yeah.
And it's a crazy thing to watch.
Well, talent in the right spots. Anthony Barr at this hybrid rush position.
Yeah, and
He and I talked after the Nebraska game. And, I wasn't around fall camp, and so I didn't and he was injured all spring camp, right? I mean, he played like 2 days in spring or something like that. So I didn't get that really good look at him, and I also didn't get to ask him every day like you guys I'm sure did about his excitement about playing defense. But he and I were just chatting briefly after the game, and it was one of those, informal, not interviews where, he knows you're with the media, but, it's not, I didn't have a recorder out,
Right.
But we were just basically talking about how much he loves this role for him.
Yeah.
And I mentioned what Gary Patterson has done at TCU with guys like Jerry Hughes, take them from excellent running back to excellent pass rusher. And, it's not this idea that, gosh, everyone knew that Anthony Barr would be this Lawrence Taylor on the defensive line always, or at linebacker always. No one knew that. Come on. But now you see it, and you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
You definitely say, I get it.
Yeah, and there was talk specifically with Barr that, he might be soft and he might be, not able to play a defensive role, even though he played, safety in high school.
Yeah.
And you look at it now, there were signs last year that he was not the guy that he was touted to be, this soft kind of guy, because he blocked.
He blocked incredibly well.
Crazy.
Yeah.
There were some vicious blocks he laid on guys last year, and
he can be nasty.
You watched it and you were just like, I remember asking him towards the end of the year, hey, would you ever consider a switch to defense? Because he caught, 2 balls in that silly little offense. And it was just like... Shooter! The pistol! Don't you wish that they'd still had the pistol, though, for that Nevada series in a couple of years? Just so it could have been pistol on pistol and we could have called it the duel? Just so we could have had awful, awful duel headlines?
The answer is I would rather...
I would rather shoot
take one of
myself with a
those
pistol.
pistols.
Yeah.
And the worst part is that the pistol in itself is not a bad offense.
No.
It's honestly not.
And I'm sure if you talked to Chris Alt off the record and you asked him about it, he'd be like, I don't know what the hell UCLA's coaches were doing.
Well,
I
can tell you,
pistol.
I can tell you from someone. This came from someone who spoke to Chris Alt, okay, who literally said, "Can you explain the UCLA situation to me?" And Chris Alt told them, "Yeah, they came and they learned it, quote unquote, the entire offense in 3 days,
and that's crazy.
As if it didn't take us 3 years to do it ourselves before we even understood why we were doing it." This is the best point that I've ever made about college football, and it's something that it really just hit me recently, okay? And it's the idea that in high school football, you learn the what, okay? You learn what you're doing. You stand here and you go there. That's the what. In college, you need to learn the how, okay? And it's not NFL. By the NFL, seniors in college, redshirt seniors, guys like that, they finally understand the why. Okay, they start, and that's why you see so many graduate assistants come right out of the, young, good coaches come directly out of football, is because they finally understand, this is why I'm doing it. College, though, is about the how, okay? And I don't think the UCLA team ever had any clue exactly how to do it, much less the why. Jim Mastro comes in, he knows the why. He knows that, okay, you put this guy here, you put this guy here, because this safety will be looking at this corner, at this one spot. That's the why.
Right.
But when the entire staff is barely at what, and maybe 2 or 3 guys even understand the how, that ain't an offense.
Well, and I think the biggest issue with UCLA over the last several years is that they never mastered the who.
That's also a great point.
But, and that's all... it's tough.
That's the past. Let's talk about the future.
Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about Oregon State.
Oregon State.
All right, so
we'll chat about this real quick. We'll come back with Riley.
Yeah, let's come back with Riley. So we're going to listen to a little bit of Oregon State, and then do you want to talk about Oregon State now?
Well, here's let's set up the Oregon State, the Riley question, because here's what was fascinating to me about this press conference with him is everyone kept talking about the UCLA game coming up. It's a team that had just beaten Wisconsin and then got a bye. This is awkward high that you have from beating the number 13 team in the country on your own field.
And this is a team that already postponed their first game.
Yeah, exactly. To not even playing the next week. And that's what I got into with Riley is I said, Well, you'll hear it, but with Oregon State, do we have any clue? I mean, it's a team that beat Wisconsin but hasn't played anyone else.
I think this is something that Mora has touched on in the post-game and post-practice interviews. You have to go on a lot of last year. You have to go on a lot of what they did last year, and I think you have a small bit of a clue. I mean, you watch the Wisconsin game, and Wisconsin ran a lot of conventional West Coast offense, and Oregon State stopped it pretty well.
Yeah.
And
Monte
Monte Ball.
Did you know it was Monte and not Monty?
I did, only because I watched the game.
But you only recently learned this.
I only recently learned this
so
because it should have been Monty.
We're fist bumping right now because I 100% just found out from this game that it was Monte Ball.
Well, because it needs the
Thank you, the Monte Ellis flip.
We need the acento over the E.
Si,
senor. But you look at that team, and I think there's some definite strengths there. They guard pro style sets pretty well, and they've got a decent kind of pro style offense themselves. But we're going to listen to Mike Riley in a bit, but I don't think that's a team that's. I don't think Wisconsin was very good, and I'm not sure of Oregon State at this point.
Yeah, and I think UCLA is playing with this level of confidence that's gonna, it'll at least carry them a little bit through the beginning of that game while they're still trying to figure them out.
And I think that's a good point.
Which is a big point. All right, so we're going to come back. Mike Riley from the Pac-12 Conference. This is David Woods with Bruin Report Online, John Gold with CBS with the
Sup Bro podcast.
I don't know why you rolled your eyes at that. Is it because it's still a work in progress?
It's a work in progress. I think there's a lot of things we could work into that. I think we could work in the beards. I think we can work a lot of things into the title. But for now,
Mike Riley
on the Sup Bro podcast.
Okay.
Rumors spreading round United Texas town about the shack outside the games. And you know what I'm talking about. Just let me know if you wanna go to that home out on the range. They got a lot of nice girls.
Hey, Coach. When you pull off a big win like you did against Wisconsin, are you guys itching to get back on the field the next week? And does having a week off kind of maybe stunt the excitement of a big win, or does it serve the other purpose and kind of get you back to work?
Well, that's a good question, and we're not in charge of all that, or we don't have any control at this point over having that bye week. So, of course, we tried to spin it as a good week of work and getting a couple guys some rest regarding injuries, and being able to hold them out a little bit during the bye week so they would be better coming back Monday, for our first practice. So, I think you just try to spin into what can be positive about it. Of course, I would have liked to have played. We're way behind in the number of games, in college football right now with the postponement of the first game and the bye week in the third week. So, it'll be nice to get into the rhythm of a season.
Rumors spreading round United Texas town about the shack outside the games. And you know what I'm talking about. Just let me know if you wanna go to that home out on the range. They got a lot of nice girls.
All right, guys, that was Mike Riley, head coach of Oregon State, the biggest sweetheart in the Pac-12. I would love to see him star in a
rom-com. Love him to
rom-com.
be your grandpa.
He's an uncle right now to me.
You think he's uncle? He's young. He's young for.
Listen, he is the uncle. Ready? He's the uncle that goes to your high school soccer games.
By the way,
he's the uncle. It's like a Jewish Yiddish uncle. He's my uncle. What can I say? What do you want from me?
He has the temerity to be my uncle.
He has the temerity to say this. Previous conversations. He's like that uncle who's like into your life, goes to your soccer games in high school, and then is like, all right, bro, let's go get some frozen yogurt. That is a cool uncle.
Yeah.
How old is he? He's like 48, maybe?
No, I think he's in his 50s.
Is he that old?
He's been coaching for a while. You got to remember, he's had two separate
He was
stints.
in the NFL. What?
He's had two separate stints with Oregon State. He was in the NFL in, I think, the late 90s?
Yeah.
With
Ryan
the Chargers?
Leaf.
Yeah, and so he's been around a while. He's been coaching his butt off at Oregon State for, I think it's now been about 10 years that he's been up there for the second stint.
Yeah.
And consistently taking a team that's under-talented and overachieved. I mean, last year it was
Should they be under-talented?
Oregon State? Have you been to Corvallis?
I have.
It's a hole.
No, here's the thing, and maybe this is just me, and maybe it's one of the reasons that I've always kind of been not down on UCLA, but this whole idea of we're near the beach and we're near the Playboy Mansion and we got this beautiful campus and all that kind of stuff. When I think of college, and I really think of the college experience in college football, I don't know. I think of that small kind of quainter town, the Ann Arbors that go from 20,000 population to 120,000 on game day or whatever. I at least feel like you have something to sell that way. I mean, obviously Oregon's done it.
I think that attracts a certain kind of player,
But not enough?
Well, no. I mean, it attracts. I mean, think about the situations that a player would be used to that kind of thing. Texas football players, they're used to a town filling up with people on Friday night for football.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And you've got Midwestern players.
Yeah,
but
okay.
What's Oregon State recruiting in Oregon?
That's a great
They're
point.
recruiting. They try to recruit LA. They try to recruit California, and as a general rule, and California's not like that.
That's a great point.
And
That's a really good point.
And I think you look at Corvallis as a West Coast player. You look at Corvallis, you look at Pullman, even to a certain extent, you look at Tucson, and you just look at them and you're like, this isn't what I'm used to. This isn't
So
my.
then why does it work
cup
for
of tea.
Eugene? Just because of Papa Knight?
I think Papa Nike does pretty well there, but you're also in Eugene. You're an hour outside of Portland, which is a legitimate town, and Eugene, compared to Corvallis, is a beautiful little town, and it's got a tremendous amount of outdoorsiness, and it has a feel of a slightly bigger town than Corvallis.
Yeah, you're right.
You've been to both, and it's I mean, you go out to get to Corvallis, you have to take like a dirt road. I mean, it's effectively like out in the boonies. And
They've made movies about it.
as they should have. I think one was called Deliverance, right?
I think one is The Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah. And it's amazing that Mike Riley can recruit there with all the mutants in the hills. All the cannibal mutants. But
if in the Pac-12, if there's one recruiting hurdle,
it's got to be the cannibal.
It's got to be the cannibal mutants. That's definitely. I mean, when you're talking negative recruiting,
right?
You're USC and you say, look, you can't go to Oregon State. Look, they got cannibal mutants. I mean,
yeah, who knows what'll happen the first time you drive in on an official? You might have chains in the road, and then you blow your tires, and then all of a sudden things go wrong.
The Hills Have Eyes.
We just gave a great preview for that movie.
Yeah, I think just so everyone understands, the movie The Hills Have Eyes
is one of the worst movies of all time,
and apparently it's about hills with eyes.
Yeah,
or
naturally.
People with multiple eyes. I don't know.
What can you do?
Yeah. But you're right. You're right. That's a very, very good point about the idea of, and I don't. Kids in the Midwest are kind of more used to that, and maybe they have that kind of glamour. What's the word? Glamorous view of that kind of.
I think they have an appreciation of the pageantry of college football.
That's a good way to put it.
I think
great way to put it, Keith Jackson. Right? At least he didn't pull a Lou Holtz.
Lou Holtz.
The thing about this team is just the best. We can't do that. It's just
let's just not do it.
Before we get to our special segment at the end, which is hopefully going to hit our.
Should we hit a little bit on what actually Oregon State is and what this game could mean?
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, it's being hyped up as kind of. The AP I think has Oregon State ranked 26th. 26th. They're the first team out of the top 25, and they're basing it off of one game, and you can't fault them for it because Wisconsin was expected to be a good team, and because of those preseason polls we've talked about. Monte! They were expected to be a little bit better than they are, but this isn't a top 26 team. It's not. They're a year removed from 3-9, and they haven't had. Mike Riley's a good coach, but they haven't had that
Sean
fundamental
Mannion's the quarterback.
I like Sean Mannion a little, but they haven't had this fundamental change that UCLA has had. So I don't see a big difference between their 3-9 team and this team this year. I think they could be a solid 7-win team maybe this year, but they're not a team that's going to come down to Los Angeles and they're going to take a UCLA team that's basically firing on all cylinders and beat them.
Name 4 Oregon State Beavers.
Storm Woods, because he has my last name.
Okay.
Sean Mannion.
That's
Marcus
two.
Wheaton.
That's I know two of those three.
The defensive player, DJ Riley?
Tanner?
No, I don't know.
It's not DJ Tanner?
Honestly, I don't know at this point. Tracy's writing the preview this week, so I've got nothing.
And I think that, to me, says it all. I mean,
Brandon Cooks.
Okay,
Got
Brandon
it.
Cooks,
Done.
former UCLA commit.
Yeah.
That, to me, says it all. I think it'll probably be a little closer than some people expect. I think I had UCLA winning maybe 34-24, something like that, which I think the spread is what? 10?
The spread started at 11, and I think it grew to 13. And here's what I would say. I mean, I think there is a school of thought that 34-24 could be a legitimate score, but I tend to think it's going to blow the spread out of the water. I mean,
really?
I look at it like this. Oregon State had a lot of trouble scoring on Wisconsin's defense. And Wisconsin, their defense is okay. It's nothing special. And I think
UCLA's is better?
UCLA's has more athletes. UCLA has more athleticism.
That's a big statement.
Well, Wisconsin's never been known for their athletes.
That's true. But they have been known for that toughness. It's interesting that you mentioned that because UCLA went from a team that had literally, their cumulative backbone was like missing 9 vertebrae.
Right, it was made out of paper mache.
Literally. It was like...
It was a model in a doctor's office.
About to say, swear to God, I was about to say it was a 9th grade science project made out of... That's funny.
Right, and it wasn't made well.
The play, however, that Dayton Jones, and I know I especially got criticized by some blog experts who really, really know UCLA and went to every single practice for 3 years, those guys, who criticized me for saying Dayton Jones was going to be great last year and criticized Tracy.
I believe the words were Dayton Jones is unblockable.
Did I say that?
The unblockable Dayton Jones, and I believe that was actually Tracy.
Okay, well then there.
It just took a year.
Well, I think he learned a little bit, but I think he also got a little humbled, and I think the toughness that he has right now, that play against Taylor Martinez, where he just dragged him down, for the safety. I mean, that's not a play that they would have made.
No, and it's
and if they're making that play, that's a defense.
Yeah, and especially out of a 3-4. I mean, and that's something else to go into. But like a defensive end out of 3-4, his job isn't to be making tackles for losses. That's something extra he's doing along with maintaining the edge.
Yeah,
containing the quarterback, holding up blockers. He's playing better than I think anybody saw him do even in fall camp last year when they thought he was unblockable.
He's playing really well.
And it's an impressive sight to see.
Angus McClure is doing a really good job with this D-line.
Yeah, and I think you have to give a lot of credit to Angus because
you really do.
Not just for that, but for personnel decisions. I think he's playing Ellis McCarthy the right way, which is limited at this point until he gets his conditioning in order.
Yeah.
And I think he's made a lot of good personnel decisions along the defensive line, and I think you have to give him a lot of credit for that.
Are you seeing Olanian enough? That's still a guy that and Graham. Keenan Graham and Olanian are two guys that...
And I think that's an issue with the guys ahead of them because both of them are playing outside linebacker this year. So you've got Jordan Zumwalt and you've got Barr. Anthony Barr, who are both playing very, very well. I don't know how much of that is a function of the outside linebacker position in this defense because I think there is an element there where that position, whoever's playing it, as long as they have a decent amount of athleticism, is going to get a fair amount of sacks. But
sacks? Okay.
they're behind those guys, and so I think yes, I would like to see more of them, but it's a tough thing when you're behind two guys who are playing as well as they are.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, guys, we're going to head to our little special segment, and we're going to wrap things up. We've already gone twice as long as we expected.
I would say about 3 times as long, but I blame Brandon Huffman for most of that.
I blame us as well.
I think we should be blamed. I think everyone should be blamed. I think this was a Hindenburg-like debut.
I guarantee they're still listening, though.
You think so?
I guarantee it.
We should test it later.
We should. What word can we use?
Snuffleupagus.
Snuffleupagus. If you listen to this podcast, please use the word Snuffleupagus in a random post, letting us know your thoughts on the name for this, and also just letting us know you're still listening.
Yeah.
And we'll be back after this short break.
United Texas town, about to check outside the games. And you know what I'm talking about. Just let me know if you wanna go. that home out on the range. They got a lot of nice girls.
All right. So now we actually would like to give a few beard maintenance tips.
What's this segment going to be called?
I think. I mean, this is actually another name that we need to figure out.
It is.
I think on beards, beard maintenance, and you.
Trivial Hirsute?
Trivial Hirsute. You've got it.
Is that it?
I think that's good.
Trivial Hirsute.
All right, so beginning with Trivial Hirsute.
With David Woods and Jonathan Gold.
With David Woods and Jonathan Gold, the food critic.
Presented by... I think this is presented by ZZ Top.
Yeah, I believe that should be.
Yeah. They're the financial backers for this segment.
They are the financial backers for all of our endeavors today. So I think today we should cover how to properly condition your beard.
That's it. I use, what is it? Starts with an N. Is it Noxzema? It's not Noxzema, but it's one of them. It's in a blue thing. It's in a blue bottle, and it's a beard thing with the little beads. It has the little soap beads.
Sure.
Where it's like grainy, and you can actually feel it like cleaning stuff off your face and out of your beard.
Yeah.
And in my case, that we're talking chicken wings.
Entire chickens at various points. And so...
There has not... All right, fine. There's been a whole chicken in my beard. Whatever.
The one time there was one. What about the time there were two? But you look at it... I mean, conditioning your beard is an important facet of any bearded person's life because... If you have a significant other, and we're not, man, woman, whoever
we don't judge here.
We don't judge. We're equal opportunity. But whoever your significant other is, you want to be giving them something soft. You want to give them.
Oh, is that what you want to be giving your significant? Let me try and regroup my thoughts.
Regroup your thoughts.
You want to be giving your significant other something soft. Okay.
John, I think you've devolved this into something that was not.
All right, well, I'm sorry, baby. You put it out there. Sup,
but
bro?
You want to have something that's not going to be harsh. That's not going to
way harsh, Ty.
That's not going to feel like a Brillo pad.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, my question is this: yours is bordering on the Lorax right now.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, it's a substantial beard. When you go out for your day, you're being David Woods. You're just out on the town.
Just out there. Being a beard.
Just being a beard, right? Do you tend to your beard in a situation like that, just out on the town?
Do I tend to it out on the town, or do I tend to it before?
I'm saying before you go out. Like I'm not saying like out for a party. I'm just saying your day you're covering UCLA.
Any day that I'm, preparing for a day out, I not only shampoo the beard, but I condition it.
Really?
Right, because the important thing is, look, my beard is about as long as my hair.
Yeah. It's
about as long as my top hair. And whatever I would do to that, I want to do to this. Because this is honestly a harsher hair than anything on the top
and I can attest, full of nacho dip.
Full of nacho dip.
Just packed full of
avocado. There have been days where...
I'm a nice host.
Oh, those were
splendid. Some good nachos.
They were splendid nachos.
As if there was any doubt, yes, I made David Woods nachos at my apartment.
But
she had a nice day.
It was a lovely day.
It was pretty sweet.
And I think that was our beard maintenance tip for the day. You always want to condition your beard, and you want to make sure it's as soft as possible.
Well, ultimately, beards serve two purposes, right? Keep your face warm.
And storage for leftovers. Right.
What I don't like to do is mix those two. If the beard for that day is serving a purpose as it's just there for looks, well, third purpose is to hide my gullet. Okay,
right.
Which is listed like the third
your
neck.
Goiter, if you will.
Goiter's good wit. I was gonna say a Frank Beamer joke, but just not nice.
No, that's not good.
Anyway, my goiter. Back to the goiter. There's the idea of it's there to cover something, but then when it gets to the level that yours is at, which is spectacular,
hirsute,
this trivial hirsute. When it gets to that point, there becomes a whole other level of appreciation for it. And at what point did you go from, look, I just have a beard, to I got a beard I'm taking care of?
It was pretty simple, actually. It was a pretty seamless transition because at a certain point you have a beard and people comment on it. The first time you get a comment on your beard, you make a decision.
Yeah.
And the decision is, do I shave the beard now that I've gotten a comment?
This is
or
great.
do I double down?
Do you double down on the beard?
And what I chose to do was double down.
Tripled. You tripled.
What it was?
No.
What it actually was is I got
Pause.
Delta 20. I got Delta 20.
Wrong. You were
I
dealt.
split. Got 2 blackjacks and said, "No, dealer, let me double down on those 11s." That's exactly what I did.
I was gonna go 8s and do the split thing, and you took it to such a good level.
No, and I think that's what I did.
I
and
love this.
I think that was an important step, and I think it's.
So what you're saying is your beard is the single worst move in gambling?
I think it was the single worst decision I've ever made that has paid off tremendously.
Has it?
I mean, I think it's. Yes, I mean, my girlfriend would probably break up with me if I shaved my beard.
Really?
Yeah, it's the craziest thing in the world. She's a saint. She's a saint.
She's a saint, and she has no beard. Which is if she had a beard also, it
wouldn't be as big of a feature because she has mine to play with.
Now all of a
she's
sudden-
thinking, "Oh, I want a beard."
And then eventually, she just becomes the bearded woman circus freak, and you're just that guy who she's dating.
Right, and
Like,
then
right
I'm dating
now-
the bearded lady.
Right now, she's dating the bearded lady. You hold the cards, my man.
Exactly.
Split them. Exactly.
John Gold has it right there. All right, so everyone, that was the inaugural
I think we gotta end it at that.
Sup Bro podcast.
Sup, bro?
We went all over the place. I think we'll probably be trimming it down a little bit as the weeks go on, but
Yeah.
we're hoping to do this every week. Again, if you have any thoughts on the title, Sup Bro may or may not be
Sup?
may or may not be the title going on. But
Sup, bro?
for Bruin Report Online, I'm David Woods, and this is John Gold from
CBSSports.com.
and we're signing
And bro,
off.
now looks like I'm doing some features and stuff. for
Mr.
you
Feature
guys.
Writer for Bro.
Mr.
When's
Feature.
your first feature coming out?
This week, I believe,
week?
on the UCLA offensive line. And what, in my opinion, was the single most, the pivotal decision of the offseason for the UCLA football team, and that is Adrian Clem deciding to start 3 freshmen on the offensive line, and you can read about that.
Mad boss he is.
He's good.
All right, guys. So it was good talking, and I will we'll see you again on the flip side.
Sup, bro?
Sup, bro?